Welcome to Storytime Sunday. Today we are reading from Fort Vermilion, People in Our Vast Trading North, turning to page number 38. This is a portion of the Cecil Stubb and Magdalene Smith Lapp story. Growing up, Magdalene lived on a small farm at Stony Point with her parents and her 10 brothers and sisters. They grew oats, barley, and wheat, and as she said, we worked like dogs, not like today when everything is easy. When haying time came around, Magdalene rode the lead horse of the binder as the binder was pulled by 4 horses. After all the hay and grain was cut, it was stooked by hand. One time, when it was harvest time, a new minister came to town, Reverend Fisher, and he said to a friend that he was going to help the Smith girls in the field. At the end of the day, he remarked to the girls, "You played me out." Magdalene went to school for 3 years at the Anglican Mission, Irene Training School. She would be taken to school on Sunday night and would stay there for 2 weeks. After the 2 weeks, someone's parents would come and pick them all up and take them home for the weekend. School was not taught by grades, but by readers, and the children wrote on slates. They were taught reading, writing, spelling, arithmetic, history, and geography. Magdalene's first teacher was Edith White, then Benjamin Dakota, who later buried in the Anglican cemetery here, after being found dead in his cabin at Carcajou, where he lived and trapped in later years. 2 other teachers were Charlie Henderson, a Scotsman, and William McIlroy, her last teacher. She was attending Stony Point by that time. There was very little entertainment in those days. At Christmas, there would be a tree and small gifts for the school children when they had their concert. There were no trees in the homes, and Christmas was not celebrated as it is today. New Year's was a time for fun and visiting. Her family, the William Smiths, would go to the home of their father's parents, William and Mary Smith, where they would enjoy breakfast with all their family members from the community. They would then continue on to the north side of the river to visit family and friends, and then those on the south side and home again after a long, full day. When people got together for dances, it was in the newer, larger homes and to violin or fiddle music. Some of the men who played for these get-togethers were Magdalene's father, William Smith, her uncle, James Smith, and Augustus Lizotte, Donald Lizotte's father. To get to these dances, they had to work hard all week, and then when the day for the dance came around, they would get the sleigh and team ready and bundle up in robes and blankets. When the dance was in Buttertown, they had to cross the river. Jockey Lambert, Peter Lambert's brother, would pick them up on the north side and take them to the dance. Cards was another type of entertainment people enjoyed. King Pedro was a favorite. Also hearts and whist. Magdalene remembers her uncles coming to their home to play King Pedro, and there would be enough men to make up 2 tables. There was little in the line of luxuries in those early years. The girls only had 2 dresses, one for Sunday and one for every day. Their mothers made them items of clothing from flour bags washed and bleached until white. They never wore slacks. In winter they had long johns and stockings with moccasins. The Smith home was a quarter of a mile from the river, and Magdalene remembers opening a hole in the ice for the cattle and letting them out to drink while she stood in her dress until they were finished, then putting them back in the barn. The girls used rags to roll their hair in to make curls, and the older women wore their hair in braids wound round around their head in buns at the back. Everyone had their own chickens and eggs, beef, butter, and milk. Each home had what was known as a dairy in the yard. During the winter, a cellar, or well, under this building was filled with blocks of ice, and in summer, the milk separator, milk, butter, cream, and fresh meat, were kept there to keep it cool and fresh. Pork was kept in containers covered with a brine so it would not spoil. Butter was made in a large wooden churn. In later years, Magdalene's mother traded her extra eggs for tea and sugar at the Bay store. In the very early years, the Stony Point people brought such things as tea and sugar. The Stony Point people bought such things as tea and sugar at the Lawrence Ranch across the river from them. Large gardens were grown and had the main vegetables: potatoes, turnips, onions, carrots, and beets. These vegetables kept very well in the cellars under their homes. No tomatoes, lettuce, and such vegetables were grown at that time. All energies were put toward growing the staples. There were many wild fruits such as strawberries, raspberries, saskatoons, chokecherries, and cranberries. There was no canning of this fruit, but it was picked in large quantities and made into jam. Feathers were never thrown away, but were used for feather robes. The homes were very clean and comfortable. The floors were not painted, but were scrubbed by the women on their knees with lye soap, which they made each fall after butchering. The soap was made using a large copper pail partly filled with water, to which was added 5 pounds of fat of any kind and 1 can of lye. This mixture was boiled and skimmed until it became thick. It It was then cut in squares and set on a shelf in the dairy to be used as needed. Curtains were a luxury and were never used when Magdalene was a child. Cotton shades were made and used for privacy. House plants and flower beds outdoors were not common in her childhood. People did not grow things they could not eat. When Magdalene was 18 in 1912, she met Cecil Stubb Lapp. He was originally from North Dakota, USA, and first went to Piers, south of Edson, Alberta. Cecil came from Peace River to Fort Vermilion on a raft. They were married on January 25th of 1917 in St. Barnabas Church, Stony Point, by Reverend Quarterman. Their first child, Mina, Mrs. James Ward, was born in 1919. Their first son, Ira, was born in 1921. Cecil came from a family of 9, one brother, Jay, and sisters Eva, Bessie, and Carrie, who was Cecil's twin, Vera, and her twin sister who died at birth, Pearl and Fern. Cecil was a trapper and trapped at Bistro Lake, north of present-day Zama. In the summer, he farmed at Fort Vermilion. One year, he put up hay for the Indians at Hay Lakes area, and while he was there, they asked him if he would set up a store there. Stubb agreed to do this and put a wagon trail over Watt Mountain to Hay Lakes. He also built a warehouse on the summit of Watt Mountain for freight. That year, Magdalene and the children, Mina, Ira, and baby Ralph, who had been born that spring, April 4th, 1923, went to Hay Lakes for the winter. From 1923 onward, the Lapp family moved back and forth from Hay Lakes to Fort Vermilion. They would take only what was really needed. For medical supplies, there was Zam, Buck, Vicks, camphorated oil, and castor oil. During those years, 5 children were born. Lorne, 1926, twins Elmer and Elda, 1930, Rena, 1932, and Lyle, 1937. They were all baptized and confirmed at St. Barnabas Church at Stony Point. In those days, there was very little entertainment, but Magdalene had an accordion which she loved to play for family and friends. This was really enjoyed by those around her as they joined in the singing of hymns and old favorites. In 1929, during the fear of an outbreak of diphtheria, the Lapp family were in Hay Lakes. Dr. Hammond went out to give Cecil, Magdalene, and their 4 children a needle. Magdalene was affected by the vaccination. Her arm was badly swollen. She was very frightened, miles from everywhere, with her family to care for. Another frightening experience took place about 1927 or 28. When Ralph was about 4 or 5, he was at a neighbor's, Jim Murray's, who was cooking dog food for his sleigh dogs outside on the open fire. Ralph slipped and fell into the 5-gallon pail of boiling water. His arm was badly burned, and with very little medical experience, Magdalene coped with the accident the best she knew how. A snippet of the story of Magdalene and Cecil Stubb Lapp from Fort Vermilion, people in our vast trading north. See you next Sunday.